I think one of the biggest things that happened was early on in my career in St. Francisville when we began to develop this coordinated school health model initially. And we saw several of the initial children that came into the program who had never seen a dentist, had only been to a doctor maybe once or twice. They were missing a lot of school. They had attendance issues, and therefore then they had academic issues and they had behavior issues. Once we put in coordinated school health, where they were able to get their medical care, and then they were able to get on the medicines that they needed, and they were able to get the parental support that they hadn't had before, you just saw miraculous changes in their behavior and their academic success. And that's why St. Francisville now has one of the best school districts in the state. They've been doing this since 1989. And their graduation rates are now always one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 in the whole state of Louisiana. I think to be very successful with coordinated school health, you have to have the buy-in from the community. I think the awareness of the community, making sure that everyone in the town, in the school district, understands what coordinated school health is and what it's not. One of the more important things that we do is take the red flag issues, I call them, off the table. So we ask the community, what do you not want to have happen? It may be that they say, well, we don't want you to do anything but abstinence-based sex education. We don't want you to be giving out condoms, for instance. Not that we would be doing that, but if that's a perception in people's minds, it needs to be corrected. So the whole community awareness is key. And then I think the second most important thing is you put in those programs that are going to earn you some dollars. So if you can put in nurses and therapists who can then claim Medicaid funds that can be used to help pay for those services, that begins to let people know that this is not something that's just a giveaway program, that it's not going to drain the coffers of the general fund, that there are dollars out there if we just use our heads and think out of the box. When it gets down to some of those difficult changes, people are used to doing things one way, they're used to eating what they want to eat and all that, you have to use the data. You have to be able to bring in the data to say, this is what's happening to our children. One of the things that I do in every school district is I do a fitnessgram for all of our children up front. So I can say to people, this is how many kids are overweight, this is how many kids are seriously obese. We do blood pressure screenings, we do a lot of things so that we can bring to the public the information that lets them know this is why we're doing it. We're not doing it just to be mean, we're not doing it because we don't like the Hershey bars, we're doing it because the health of your kids is at stake. Most of the problem when you look at rural school districts and they think they can't do things is the transportation issue, it's the scarcity of services. So the first thing we have to do, and I did this in West Feliciana because West Feliciana had a total population of about 3,000 people. The town itself had about 1,500 people. So it was very rural. There was no hospital there. We had to take what we could get. We had to develop the funding sources. For instance, with Medicaid, we had to bring in services of people who could bill for Medicaid, and we assigned them to our schools, and rather maybe than assigning them to the hospitals, since there was no hospital. We had to get everybody together too to say we're gonna work on this collaboratively. There's a saying that says it takes a village to raise a child. I've changed that a little bit into one that says we have to change the way we do business in the village. So in other words, the school district, whatever health services are there, whatever mental health services are there, we have to come together and come up with a plan for the county, but specifically that's engaged with the schools. It is more difficult. One of the things though, as you have poorer school districts, you should be getting more federal dollars, and sometimes decisions have to be made about how those dollars are used. Sometimes we buy reading materials, and what we should be buying are nurses or therapists because the kids are not going to learn how to read unless they're healthy. So we use that same concept. I think you have to use what you have. I do think there are grant dollars available, especially for rural communities, but that doesn't last. So eventually you have to get down to what's there every day and try to utilize those things together rather than continuing the silo operation that we have where this department is working separately and that department is working separately. The way I try to look at things is this, that every school becomes a family. And when you take those schools together, all those families, they create what I call this village. And in that village of schools where we have elementary kids going to middle and junior high and then going to high school, that there's a connecting point there, that we're handing these children off. We're handing their academic records off, we're handing their discipline records off, but we're also handing there's health records off, so that there's continuity of services between them. I think the other thing that I would see is if you do coordinate school health the right way, your whole culture changes. You begin to look at how do we keep these kids in school, how do we get them to complete high school, and not so much worry about what their grade point averages are, but instead worry about what their physical and mental health situations are, so that we can graduate all these kids or have them complete high school with, with no health issues, with no drug habit, with no criminal record. I think those are the things that you'll see once you get coordinated school health in place. It's not so much if we're academically an A school, although I think that comes too, but it's the welfare of these kids. It's more of a whole child approach that people begin to care about. One of our biggest challenges in today's world is to create nurturing, loving environments in our schools. There's so much tension, there's so much stress. And I think the best thing that coordinated school health can do is, as we create these families, that school becomes that safe place for kids. It becomes a place that's fun to be. I think that's changed over the years. School sometimes is not so much fun. So one of the things that we can do to help our children and to help our families and to help our teachers is to reduce the stress. And you reduce the stress by making sure that everybody understands the most important thing that we're doing is we're trying to educate children, not just in terms of academics, but in terms of their social well-being, their ability to make good choices. The things that they think about don't have to be just the reading, writing, and arithmetic. The things they can think about are how do we service other people. I think that's one of the things that we see in coordinated school health communities is that the whole service issue comes alive again. And that's what I'd like to see in all of our schools. I think there has to be a conscious decision by the community to give the schools permission to address things other than just the test scores. And the way you do that is you bring together a community committee, a coordinated school health committee that's made up of not just educators, but people from the health profession, people from corrections and law enforcement, and you bring together all the data to show what's going on and how coordinated school health can help fix all of those individual areas. Because if coordinated school health works in your public schools, then your other health initiatives are going to work, your corrections initiatives are going to work, because we're going to keep more kids in school and they're going to be healthier. So it can't come just from the school, it's got to come from the community, giving the school permission, giving the principals permission to look at things other than just the reading, write, and arithmetic. And I know that's a difficult proposition. Doesn't mean we're abandoning any of that. The high stakes tests are still important, but what we're saying is we're going to get to those results we want in a different way, on a different road. But it can't be just the schools making that decision. The community has to give them permission to do this. And the only way I know to do that is to get the data and get all these people from the community to come together and say out loud, it is okay for us to go this direction. I think there are two things that we always try to leave with people, and that is that this is a win-win for everybody. If you do coordinated school health correctly, your public schools are going to get better, which means that your other social service systems and your health systems and correction systems are going to get better, which means that you're going to use your money more wisely. So it's a money issue, it's an economic issue. The second thing we look at is that there is not one way to do this. There are multiple sources of dollars and partnerships out there. Even the larger hospitals in places that aren't near your rural areas, they're able now to use the new Medicaid laws and the new things that are coming through Obamacare to place nurses and therapists in schools and get a fairly large amount of reimbursement, so that it makes sense for them to do this as a business model. So we don't need to just look at one way of doing it. There's multiple ways of doing it. The biggest thing is getting the people into the schools. And whatever way you have to do that, then that's the way you should go.